Hi there and welcome to the Colton Boutique Show. Today we're very pleased to have with us the director of the esteemed Chateau Haut-Bailly, Véronique Sanders. I first met Véronique back in 2015 at the Saatchi Gallery at Robert Parker's Matter of Taste, where she showed off some beautiful vintages of Chateau Haut-Bailly, which we're fortunate enough to taste, and they've just continued to become even better since. So thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, thank you for joining us as well. And let's get to it. Really, 2020 has been an interesting year to say the least. For us, one of the highlights was the 2019 En Primeur campaign, and it was one of the most well-received in recent years. How was it for you guys?
The Primeur campaign or the 2020 vintage?
Oh, sorry, the 2019 Primeur campaign.
19 Primeur campaign. It was actually an incredible campaign because, as you know, the whole world has changed. Everything kind of collapsed with the lockdowns everywhere.
Yes.
And we really didn't know in March, April, if we would do a Primeur campaign or not. And we were in touch with lots of clients around the world who basically told us we need a Primeur campaign, we need Bordeaux, we need things to move on, and we also need not to talk just about coronavirus.
Yes.
So we tried to reinvent ourselves. We tried to put everything in order to make it happen despite the conditions, which were crazy. No one could come to Bordeaux to taste the wines. And what people needed is to have a few experts giving their advice and their opinion on the quality of the vintage overall, and specifically Chateau by Chateau. So we, logistically speaking, we reinvent the world, and it was great actually, and it worked. And thanks to that, thanks to the fact that the experts played their role, that the clients also were able to taste and talk to their own customers, we started a Primeur campaign, which was for me kind of miraculous, and it was successful because we also listened to the needs of the clients. Yes. Who said we needed to be well priced. So all of us made an effort to price this vintage, which is a great vintage, at a terrific price. Definitely. And I think if you were a wine lover, you had no choice than to buy 2019 of your favorite chateau. Personally, we also bought a lot of 19 because we know that it's something which should not be missed.
No, it shouldn't. There was a lot of comparisons to the likes of the 2009 and 2015 vintages as well. And you're right, a lot of the Bordeaux Chateau had to improvise, didn't they, with their samples, which they needed to send, because a lot of samples, as an example, I follow a number of wine critics via social media, and the likes of Neil Martin or Jeb Dunnock or Jane Anson were speaking about how they're having their samples shipped over to them. Was that something you found easy to do? Was it a tough decision to make? Because there was a lot of, there were some other critics who were saying, well, that's not a really fair way to sample the wines. You should be able to go to the chateau to sample the wines. They shouldn't be sent to you. They're not going to taste the same. Do you think that makes much of...
Yeah, it was a big risk because since many years and decades, everybody comes to Bordeaux to taste the wines because they are fragile at this stage. You know, it's babies. They are 6 months old or 7 months old. They are not bottled. It's barrel samples. So we were very worried about the fact that how is it going to travel? Will it be stuck somewhere? And I was very impressed by the speed of the shipment. For example, to send a sample to Hong Kong, I did it on a Wednesday morning. It arrived on the Thursday evening, and you could track it. You could know where it was, and you know, within a few hours, all the main critics were able to have your wine. Fortunately, we didn't have any problem. It was not stocked anywhere, and the wines traveled well. It was not too cold. It was not too warm. It was just fine. And all the critics played a fantastic role, tasting it immediately and letting you know if there would be a problem. Fortunately for Bailly, there was no problem, and the wine showed beautifully everywhere, from London to Los Angeles, and
Yes.
including in Japan or in Hong Kong. So,
Yes.
but it was a big risk, and I'm not sure we can do it all the time. We were just lucky with all the conditions which were well aligned, but in a normal world, would it work? I don't know.
And it's certainly a risk that paid off as well. It was like we said, it was a very good vintage. Well, it is a very good vintage year, without question. So, talking about the 2020 harvest, obviously it's been an early harvest. How is 2020 looking overall for Haut-Bailly?
2020 is also an incredible story because it was, as you said, an early vintage, and France went into lockdown mid-March, and the vegetation, was booming. So imagine that in April we had to hire 50 people to work in the fields when
Wow.
everybody was supposed to stay at home. So also it was another fight that we had to have to maintain the line for good vintage, for the birth of a good vintage. And every day we had to adapt ourselves to the new health situation, condition, what was allowed, what was not allowed, and to keep working in the field. And actually it was a saving grace to be out in nature, because it was very quiet, not a single noise, not a plane, not a car, nothing. So
Wow.
it was a very I will remember that year all my life, because
Yes.
the nature looked more intense, But then we had a very wet spring. May was terribly humid, and another very strong mildew pressure. We also had in March, April, a bit of frost pressure in April. And then what happened is 50 days of drought in July. Not
Yeah.
a single drop of rain during 50 days. And an incredible summer, and an incredible harvest condition, weather condition during the harvest. So we were lucky to harvest peacefully, quietly, in extremely good condition. Um, what is a beautiful crop, actually. It's not a huge volume. We don't have the same quantity as we had in 2019. It's much smaller.
Okay.
Uh, so most of the chateau produce probably between 30 and 35 hectoliters by hectare.
Wow.
But it's very intense. It's very concentrated.
Yes.
Uh, it's probably a vintage which will be closer in terms of analysis to the 2009 or 10 vintage.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And would you say with that drought, was that drought similar, or is this an unfair comparison to obviously that massive heat wave that happened back in 2003?
No, it was not like that. It was very different. 2003 was very special. We had also in 2020 a few days which were extremely hot. So yes, we had that, but it was not like 2003. Very different.
Okay, good. And you've mentioned before that your grandfather inspired you to continue working alongside the Wilmer family, and the feeling of family is very evident within Chateau Haut-Bailly. How much of that is down to lessons passed on from previous generations?
Well, I am at Haut-Bailly by passion, by love, by all what my grandfather transmitted to me when I was a child. I was always with him, always working with him, and it's really a choice, a heart choice if I'm here.
Yes.
When my family sold Haut-Bailly in 1998 to Bob Wilmers, it was of course a shock for all of us, but it was very positive for Haut-Bailly because Bob Wilmers was an amazing man, and I was so lucky as a woman and as a relatively young woman at that time to be able to start running this estate, because you had no young people at this stage in Bordeaux, and you had very, very few women. So it was a privilege. I kept learning with my grandfather during 2 years, and then we tried to adapt to everything which was already changing very fast at that time, in
Yes.
terms of production, in terms of commercialization, communication. It was just the beginning of internet. It was so
Oh, it
the
was,
world
wasn't it?
changed
Yeah. Yeah.
incredibly a lot in the last 20 years. So it was a fascinating 20 years, and I was extremely privileged to have be able to run this estate for Bob Wilmers.
Very good. Very. And you mentioned obviously about the late great Robert Wilmer, and I remember reading in Decanter magazine the obituary, or the dedication, remembering some of the highlights of Robert Wilmer, and there was a particular quote in there by Warren Buffett who said, and I quote, when he learned of the unfortunate passing of Robert Wilmer, that he was a remarkable banker, an even more remarkable citizen, and wonderful friend. Now, I'm sure there is a lot. However, what are the main lessons that you carry with you through Robert Wilmer's mentorship to this day?
Robert Wilmers has his son, Chris, who is now the chairman of our board, says had a superpower. His superpower was to ask questions. He
Wow.
could ask questions to everyone, but he was very carefully listening to the answers, and he was then analyzing everything, and he was then able to make the right decision. Sometimes he would take time because he would ask lots of questions to lots of people, but he was somebody who was incredibly concerned by people, by human.
Yes.
And it was absolutely fantastic to be able to work with him or for him, because I learned a lot from him. He was the kind of person who had the global picture, but who would go also very much into detail. So it's
Yes.
I think it's a way to move to perfection, because you should never forget where you're going. You should never
Absolutely.
forget the big lines, but
Absolutely.
you should be concerned at all level by every single detail.
Yes.
And at Haut-Bailly, we are known to work with lots of precision, and I think it's very important. And he was somebody who was interested by everything. So the way you could have a conversation with him was always something very special.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us as well. So moving on, as we've mentioned before, at Chateau Haut-Bailly, it's ingrained within the local community. Obviously, how great the wines are. Again, that family approach. How important is it to you that people could do more than just taste your wines, but also visit and enjoy the whole experience? Because there's a few events that can take place at Haut-Bailly, isn't there? Like conference rooms, different levels of tastings, even some chocolates as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we love wine, so we love food,
Yes.
And many years ago, actually, like I think almost 12 years ago, we hired our first chef, private chef,
Mm-hmm.
and we launched what we call a private table. So we are not a restaurant, but people from all over the world who want to have a special experience with the French art de vivre, a very nice table dressed, perfect food from the market. The chef goes to the market every
Yeah.
morning, adapt himself to the different seasons and to the different wines we're going to serve. People can enjoy that at Haut-Bailly. And we also opened in 2015 some beautiful rooms at Chateau Le Pape, which is a neighbor estate that we bought in 2012. We did 3 years of renovation, and we actually won a Golden Award for the best place to stay in Bordeaux. It's only 4 bedrooms and a suite of 2. And it's in the heart of the vineyard. It's at 15 minutes from the city center of Bordeaux.
Oh, wow.
And it's a very special experience, and people just love it, you know. So you can just enjoy life in the middle of a beautiful vineyard, have some good food at Haut-Bailly, have some great nights, and
Some great
enjoy the
wines.
swimming pool at Chateau Haut-Bailly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
we try to welcome guests with passion. We try to share our experience with them. We try to show them the specificities of our vineyards, and we have 4 hectares of very, very old vines, and people enjoy looking at the different grape varieties which are all mixed in it. So there's a lot to do.
Great. And how's that been throughout this year? Has it been off and on, or have you completely closed the doors from that side of things for this year, and you're planning on reopening next year?
We actually had a very nice summer season, but we closed everything in March, April, and May. We are closed again, of course, in a few weeks.
Yes.
But in July and August, we had lots of people from around France, some English people, and we had a very nice summer season. And we look forward to reopening as soon as the world is back to normal.
Well, fingers crossed for that, most definitely. And you at Chateau Haut-Bailly, you had planned for new cellars and a revamp of some existing structures. This was announced prior to 2019, and I believe you was looking at aiming to have that all completed by 2021. Have those projects been able to go ahead with all of this year's events?
Yes, it was, of course, slowed down, but we are about to reveal the new cellar. So early 2021, you will hear much more about it.
Brilliant.
It's an incredible project. It's a project where architecture meets environment, and it's completely integrated in the landscape. So from outside, you will see just a garden which is flying up. It's extremely discreet and elegant from outside, but from inside we have a space we never had before, and there is a few architectural, technical, environmental prowess which will make it a place to visit definitely.
Yes.
It's really, we wanted to build the Haut-Bailly of tomorrow, so we try to think of everything that we could use in order to respect as much as we can the tradition of our terroir, because the fundamentals are outside in the vineyards, and Haut-Bailly is known to be extremely traditional and respectful of this incredible terroir. But we have to work with the tools of today if you want to keep at the level of what we'd love to do, you know.
Yes, yeah, exactly. No, and we look forward to coming to visit it hopefully next year then. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Fingers crossed. All right, and moving on to another subject here. We've seen a real positive change in recent years, or in more recent years, with more women holding powerful positions within the industry. There are the likes of yourself, the late great Baroness Philippine de Rothschild, Stephanie Dubois of Angelou, now Justine Tesseron of Ponte Cane, for example. Do you feel we are getting closer to a level playing field within the industry in general?
You mean if we will have more and more women?
Yes. Or more, yes.
What?
Definitely.
Well,
more women, like I said, in your position, because you've been there, as I said, for a very long time now. You know, you've been one of the pioneers in that respect.
Yeah, when I started, you had very, very few women. And I always thought it was an advantage to be a woman. At the beginning, of course, I was not recognized. So I was listening a lot. And when you're listening, you're learning.
Yes.
So it was great. And I'm very happy with my first years where I was silent and trying to understand everything I could. Today, you have more and more women, and that's brilliant. And, you know, I'm not very fanatic of quotas and parities.
Yes.
But I have to say that at Haut-Bailly, by coincidence, we have 50% of men and 50% of women in every field, in the vineyard, in the cellar, in the office. So it's a very interesting mix of men and women. And my belief is actually that the complementarity is something which is fantastic. And when we have to make decisions in any kind of matters, I always talk with the men, and actually the men also talk with me, because our vision are different, but they are complementary.
Okay.
And if you want to make a good decision, it's very important to have both visions to match with each other. And as long as we don't agree, we actually don't make decisions. So it's sometimes a long process, but it's a very constructive process. And I'm very happy to see women everywhere. It doesn't mean at all that men are less qualified.
No, no,
On the
no.
opposite, we need men
Absolutely.
dramatically.
Yeah.
But it's a good move.
Excellent, excellent. And you've mentioned in the past that Robert Parker Jr. played an important role in Bordeaux Chateau becoming the benchmark of wine across the world. With the 2009 vintage, he awarded, the Haut-Bailly 2009 a perfect 100-point score after realising he had made a mistake by giving it a lesser score. Paying great compliments to yourself and Robert Wilmers in his tasting notes. Obviously, you mentioned off camera you've had a couple more 100 points since then, so you're up to 3. I'm sure that's not the last. And this helped raise the reputation even more so of Haut-Bailly. What legacy do you feel that Robert Parker has left behind now he's retired? And how important do you see the role of fine wine critique today? And when you also got that news about the 100 point, I'm sure it must have felt great, much like when a restaurant gets a Michelin star.
Every good news like that is something very special, because we work a whole year to give birth to something quite special. So it's a lot of energy, a lot of efforts you put in. So when you see your efforts, how do you say that, having success,
Yes.
it's a great feeling for the whole team, and a great recognition actually. So Robert Parker definitely did a lot for Bordeaux, in the sense that he made wine becoming popular. I think before he arrived, people knew about wine, but he made it more simple to understand for certain countries who could who maybe had less time to read about comments, wines, etc., etc. But they would feel reassured by the fact that they would buy a 95 point, and
Yes.
so it's a kind of popularized, how do you say
Yes.
that,
Yes.
wine.
Yeah.
So I think our industry in general should be very thankful to him for having been such an ambassador, an advocate for the wines, and making lots of new countries enjoying wine. So that's something very important. At this time, he was the only one. Today, I think there is a multiplicity of critics, which is excellent also,
Definitely.
because we are all surrounded by much too many information. But information tomorrow will be key. And you need the good data. You need to have the right elements to make decisions. And I think you probably have around the world 20 or to 30 imported critics
Mm-hmm.
who have the expertise, who know their terroir, who know the different vintage you've been producing in the last few decades, who are competent to write about wine and deliver to the customers what they should know. What is this wine about? What is the taste? Describing with lots of words what will match your own taste. Because actually what is important when you're drinking and enjoying wine is that it's matching your taste. And there are so many different tastes around the world. I'm sure we don't taste exactly the same way.
Yeah,
And and some people might prefer blockbuster wine. Some people might prefer elegant, delicate wine. And it's extremely important that those wines can be described in the right way with the right words by experts.
definitely. And obviously, with that in mind, I'm going to ask you some now as part of what we call the fun quickfire questions. Okay, so you mentioned, of course, at Haut-Bailly, you employed a private chef, and there you can get some great food and some great wine. But what happens if friends of yours they were to come to stay with yourself, Véronique? What can they expect that you personally would lay? What would be your go-to dish or dishes that you would prepare, and what wines would you then pair with those dishes?
It depends if we are in. I love to cook. I love to cook. So, but it depends if we are in the winter, if we are in the summer. Let's say we are in the winter. I would love to cook some lamb, for example.
Lovely.
An agneau de 7 heures. You cook it very slowly during 7 hours, so it's very tender, very
Wow.
gentle. And then you open a great vintage of a great Bordeaux, more mature, because I think in the winter time you prefer more mature vintages. In the
Absolutely.
summertime, I tend to drink younger wines.
Yes.
So yeah.
Very good, very good. And for yourself, of course, running a chateau is not easy work. Many people see the end product, they see the bottles, and they taste the wines, and they think, oh, it's a luxury lifestyle for people like yourself. But there's a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication, and many hours in the day which are dedicated to making sure of the end product. How do you unwind? Do you have a favorite book you like to read which gives you an escapism? Do you have certain music that you like to just listen to and have a moment to yourself? What's the way in which you like to unwind?
Oh, I have lots of passion. The first one is probably to be able to share some time with my family, and I have a son who just turned 12 years old, and it's always great, especially when you used to travel a lot, to enjoy special moments with the family. I tend also to do lots of sports, so swimming, running, walking in the mountains. So
Yes.
that's things I love. And I read a lot. I love to read, so it's one of my first passion.
Wow. Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh, I'm very keen on all the French authors from the 18th, 19th century,
Wow.
Stendhal, Flaubert, Balzac, but I'm very open to all kind of literature. And I use these last months to read more books from lots of different countries.
Lovely. And obviously now they've announced here, I'm not too sure if they've announced it in France, but I was hearing yesterday on the news that a lot of people now who are going to be coming into England for business purposes will no longer have to self-quarantine. So they can just carry on about their day as per usual. Obviously, with the laws looking to become a lot more relaxed, we all deserve a holiday after how tough this year has been, generally speaking. Is there anywhere that you plan on or that you would like to go on holiday? Maybe like Switzerland or America or anywhere like that?
Well, the world is big, and we were lucky in the previous life to travel a lot and see lots of places. So there are lots of places where I would love to go back, like, for example, South Africa or Asia, of course. I would love to see our friends in Napa to see how they are
Yes.
after all these fires. I used to go to England every other week, so
Wow.
as soon as we can come back, I'd be happy. But I have
Excellent.
to say, France is so beautiful that we are lucky not to miss anything, because if you want to spend a few days, a few hours, relax yourself and think of something else, anywhere you go in France is something special. You have beautiful churches, beautiful little villages. You have great mountains. In south of France, you have the Massif de l'Esterel, which is absolutely spectacular. You know, in these red rocky mountains next to
Yes.
the sea, the Mediterranean.
Yes.
In Bordeaux, we are lucky to have the Bassin d'Arcachon with the Dune du Pilat and the Cap Ferret, where we can enjoy oysters and drink white wine and breathe the air of the sea. So, and even Paris is just fantastic. And with the fast train in 2 hours between Paris and Bordeaux, today you can almost have lunch in Paris and spend a day there and come back in the evening, which is fantastic. So we are very lucky, I have to say.
France is a beautiful country. I've said to my wife, we need to get a place, either in Paris or preferably Bordeaux, because even when I do travel there, whether it's for En Primeur tastings or just a long weekend away, whether you're taking the metro and like you mentioned, you can see the scenery. I remember walking on the streets of Paris, and every restaurant outside there had a gentleman with a box of different oysters, and you can just go in. You'll be given your bread basket. You'll have some great local wine, half a dozen oysters, like you said, some nice white wine, and it's just very atmospheric. Very atmospheric. We were seeing, parents with their children, sharing like a lunchtime. It was just very romantic, very traditional, which is really good. So all right. Sorry, go on.
We look forward welcoming you back in France.
Thank you. Hopefully to Haut-Bailly sooner rather than later. But and just one last question: outside of France, what is your favorite winemaking country or region?
Outside of France, oh God, I think it's fascinating to see how lots of wine regions around the world evolved in the last decades. And people do make great wines everywhere. My husband who is running a big estate in the Médoc at Chateau Haut-Bailly, is also running a beautiful estate in Tuscany. So we know pretty well Italy, and it's
Wow.
a very special region. But Spain is great. German wines. I'm always impressed by the vineyards in Switzerland. I love South Africa. God, it's difficult to just take one
Yes.
wine region, because if you are thinking also of what's going on in California, it's fantastic.
It is, yeah.
And I won't forget Australia and New Zealand. You have great wines everywhere today. So
Yes.
it's also a way of traveling when you're stuck at home, because every single bottle that you are tasting makes you travel and enjoy something special, so
It really does.
Way of traveling, but it's a good way.
It certainly is. Fine. Well, Véronique, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We hope the rest of this year ends on a high for you guys, and we look forward to seeing what the outcome will be of 2020. So thank you once again for joining us.
And thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.